Hello, welcome to Alyssa Jean's What If weekly reviews, where we answer all kinds of what if questions like, what if Alyssa was hosting the weekly Marvel reviews and Darrin was the guest? Ooh. And what if Marc was sitting next to Alyssa on the couch in the same square on the screen? Crazy stuff.
And what if we were all in the same time zone for once?
All in the same time zone, like for the first time ever. Hello, Brandon Howes. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. In the chat, hello, Devra. Good to see you. So actually, the main question here is, what if T'Challa had become a Star-Lord? Alternatively, could have been called, what if Thanos had just gotten a good talking to? Just somebody sat down with him and explained things. Maybe a lot of trouble could have been avoided. But we'll talk about that and a lot of other things. Why don't we say hello to Darrin? Hello, Darrin.
Hello, Alyssa and Marc. Really excited to be here. Yeah, it's been a fun series so far, so I'm kind of excited to jump in, and I'm really curious what everyone's take on this particular episode was. So, looking forward to this.
And before I let Marc say hello, I also want to say hello to Rob from Smirk and Gun Reviews in the chat, who will be with us next week. And so, Marc, why don't you say hello?
Hello. So unfamiliar with me, I'm Marc from Enchantment of Eternity. This will be the only week I'm here in person. Usually I'm over on the East Coast, but visiting this time. So great to be here to talk about this episode, which was better than I thought it would be. So yeah, just to talk about it.
Yeah. Cool. So let's all give our overall thoughts. I'd like to start with our guests, since me and Marc are the main stage. So Darrin, why don't you start? Let us know what you thought about this episode.
It was a fun episode. It was really a good time. I gotta say, I loved Chadwick Boseman coming back. I mean, just hearing that voice again as the character, it was heartwarming. And it was a fun episode. There were a lot of cameos, good little heist bit, nice little fights at the end. Like I said, it was a good time. On the other hand, it also felt a bit like fawning fan fiction. It's like some kids are on the schoolyard. One's like, oh yeah, well, what if T'Challa was Star-Lord? Yeah, man, he'd be like the coolest Star-Lord ever, man. Everybody would love him. He'd be like changing things. He'd have kicked Thanos' butt. No, man. He'd have talked Thanos out of it. That's how cool he is, man. And then Thanos would be his buddy. And then Nebula, she'd be this like hot blonde girl and everything. Oh, it'd be so cool. And that's sort of what it is. There was no challenge. There was no arc. Yeah, he discovers that, he was lied to and that his family wasn't destroyed in a war or anything like that. But that was over like in 2 seconds. Like, that's okay. I understand. And then they met and everything was fun and they had a barbecue and it was all cool. So while, again, it was a fun episode, there really wasn't much to it. And I'm starting to feel that, is this sort of what if is going to be, is just fun, but relatively sanitized bits. But I'm still hopeful.
So you don't think that the Collector was a challenge, like taking on the Collector with which we'll talk about more, how he has all these mysterious like artifacts that he shouldn't have, but like...
It was a great anime fight. Totally fun. Had a blast. Everyone was powering up constantly. It was really cool. We had a nice little Dragon Ball Z bit. Korg's apparently dead. He's fighting with his arm. He's got Cap's shield. So, I mean, yeah, to get some little insights into stuff, which I'm sure we can sort of get into. But like I said, that was fun. But was it a challenge? Were you ever concerned anything was going to be any different the way the rest of the episode was set out? No, man. It was everybody ends up fine at the end. Again, fun, just not much to it.
All right, Mark, tell us your thoughts on the episode.
Well, yeah, as I said, I liked this episode better than I thought it would. And it was great, really great. You know, having Chadwick Boseman doing his voice acting for T'Challa. And I think we're gonna get a couple more in this season, but then of course that'll be it. But so there wasn't that little memory thing they did at the end. That was it got me. But so it was a fun episode, as Darrin said. It was a lot more fun than I expected to be. And I was actually a lot more interested because I talked about last week how I love What If, but I don't like the sort of What If ones where it's like, what if this character was actually that character? And we got two of those in a row. And I think that this one was better than last one, I think they did because they changed it up more. Like a lot of things dominated more, which is what I like about What If. And because last week was basically a slightly different version than First Avenger. Well, this week was like totally different than Guardians or anything else. It just everything was like in totally different. Like they messed more with the universe, and that's what I think this show is doing. I think it's easing us into it. Like it started with the first one, which isn't that much different. Then it went to this one, which is more different, but it's still a what if this character was that character. And I think more episodes is going to get further and further away. Like I hear that next week's episode is supposed to be really dark, so I don't think it's going to be like this fun play on things. Although Darrin, I totally agree with I hear what you're saying about the playground thing. Like, oh, when did this character do that? And that's why I didn't like the concept of this episode at first, because I kind of knew that going in, because the whole concept of it seems like that to me. But what they did, so my expectations were low. But what they did with it, actually, I was more impressed with. We'll get into some of the details. I was super impressed in that. I thought it was hilarious what they did with Thanos, and and stuff like that, which I wasn't expecting. So I actually really enjoyed this episode, and I do think the show's going to get better. But if it was this every week, it would get tiresome. But I think this is our sort of fun joy episode before we get into some of the more dire, serious stuff later, which I think we need, and I think it works for that.
Yeah, I feel that we're being eased into the series before we get to the dark stuff and get to the way far out stuff. And I said this last week too, that last week's episode was almost the first Avenger crammed into a half hour, but slightly different, but basically each beat still happened. And I had heard that it's going to start to differentiate more from the films as we go. And so I got what I wanted in episode 2, where this is totally different from Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the only film that you could really relate this to. It starts off in the same place in Morag, but other than that, it's completely different, has mostly different characters, whereas last week's was the first Avenger, but with Peggy Carter instead of Steve Rogers. So I'm starting to see the progress here. I'm starting to see the growth in the show. And as for the episode itself, it was one of the ones that was heavily featured in the trailers. And so when I first saw it, I was just like, really? How would that happen? Because I remember having that complaint with a lot of the comics too. I don't remember any specific examples, but it would be like, what if this and this would happen instead of that? But how would that really happen? But then, you know what? I bought it. And I agree with you guys that it was a lot of fun. I thought of the line that they used to always have in the movie trailers. It's the feel-good movie of the year. It's like the feel-good episode of the year. It was, T'Challa just being like Mary Poppins, going around making everybody a better person all across the galaxy. And I will admit that the Thanos thing was a bit much for me at first. I was like, really? That's a little bit too far. But, then I was like, this is fun, and you gotta just go with it and have fun. And I think Mark is right. I think that some of future episodes, maybe possibly even next week, are going to be less fun. So we should enjoy having fun while we can with the show. So Yeah, it was a good time. It was a feel good episode. Had a lot of fun with it. I actually don't. I see what you're saying, Darren, but I don't really care. I mean, care because like this episode was what it was, and it still beat my expectations because like Mark, I had pretty low expectations coming in. So yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I don't mean to like harp on it and say it was a horrible episode. That's why I did want to start out with it's fun, and it was great. And yes, Thanos showing up like, well, but yes, you're kind of like, but on the other hand, it's just so much fun to have all of these characters together. I mean, even Drax showing up as the bartender there for a minute. I don't think that was the Drax voice. I didn't get a chance to look over everybody who did the voice.
It was not him.
Yeah.
It was not Dave Bautista. It was a different guy.
Yeah, I just looked over the voice cast, and all the actors are the same, like Josh Brolin, even like Kurt Russell, but Dave Bautista was the only one that.
Yeah, what I heard was that they were trying to get him, but it's just the scheduling conflict, whatever. Yeah. Like they just weren't able to get him.
Sure, and a what if slightly different voice Drax. I mean, again, it all still works when you have so many of the other ones. I mean, so yeah, that's what I got to say is like, even though part of it is like, okay, come on, this is just starting to get to be a little much. You also got to be like, yeah, but Thanos is his buddy, just gonna go stand up and fight. Then Nebula's gonna come back and shoot. They're gonna be like, Dad, daughter, yeah. You know, I mean, it is infectious.
Yeah. Yeah, and Rob says in the chat the animation was still really, really great. Disney cell shade mix just works so well. I agree. I am impressed with the animation. I didn't think I would be, but I do like the animation.
Yeah, I think I heard that they're keeping the same animation style throughout the season. Like one of their ideas was to change it every episode, but they thought it would be too jarring, so they just
like the Love, Death, and Robots type of thing. Where it was a different animation style each time.
Yeah. Well, as a potential aside, I know Star Wars Legends is the anime one that is different styles. So they may be sort of testing the audience, like, how do they like this stuff? Do they want a consistency or do they like the difference? So
I'm glad they're doing the same way every time, personally. What's Brandon says, all that searching for treasure reminded me of the Discovery episode where Michael and Giorgio go and rescue Book from Orion Syndicate's junkyard. Do you mean like what do you mean the treasure hunting? Like the heist scene? Because that just reminded me of a general heist.
Yeah. Movie. Oh, yeah. It was such a heist film.
And I think the episode of Discovery you're talking about might have had that same sort of vibe to it as well.
They're all just emulating heist format.
Yeah. All right, let's get into it. I have notes here. Usually I have notes on my computer screen, but I don't want Mark to see them. So that helps me. So I wanted to start. We'll go through the episode a little bit. Opens up a little differently than Guardians of the Galaxy because the Guardians of the Galaxy film actually starts in 1988 with the flashback. This one opens up on Morag, which I thought was a good way to jump right into it. I liked that it opened with that. So some of the parallels that either I noticed or other people who watch YouTube videos I've watched noticed. But so Karath, I think the dude's name is.
Yes.
Karath. Mm-hmm. So in the original Guardians of the Galaxy, Peter Quill's like, I'm Star-Lord, and he's like, who? Never heard of you. And then with T'Challa, he's like, oh my God, I'm your biggest fan. I'm a huge fan of your work, which I thought was really funny. Right away that shows like the immediate difference between T'Challa and Peter Quill as Star-Lord. Also, it's interesting that T'Challa was like, yeah, the people call me that. I'm not comfortable with it. But it seemed like Peter Quill gave himself that name and was like, yeah, I'm Star-Lord. Call me Star-Lord. And people were like, no, you're not. Whereas T'Challa was given that name from others and doesn't even really like it. And a thing that was pointed out to me in other videos that I watched was the bow, like how he was like, "Oh, I'm going to bow to you." That sort of parallels the scene, and I think it was Infinity Wars when Bruce Banner first meets T'Challa in Wakanda,
Oh, yeah.
and he's like, "Oh, well, first there's a scene with him and Rhodey where they're like, "Should I bow?" Like, yeah, go ahead. And then when they get there and he's trying to bow, and Rhodey's like, "What are you doing, man?" And T'Challa's like, "No, we don't do that here." It was very similar, but it kind of really speaks to me that T'Challa, even though he's not technically royalty in space, he's just projects that presence. So it shows me that he was a truly great leader of Wakanda, because he wasn't just somebody who had the title of king and people bowed and respected him just because he had that title. It was him. It was totally who he was inside, and he's projecting that presence, because even when he's not royalty out in space, he's still treated that way. So I found that very interesting, a very interesting character beat for T'Challa. So we'll start with you sitting here next to me, Mark. What did you think of that whole opening sequence there on
I love
Morag?
I personally love the whole gag of the contrast between, because that one character with Korg, that one character, like I always think of him as the guy who goes, "Ooh," like, yeah. That's like the most like, probably a line for me. I'm Star-Lord, man, and it's like, "Ooh, never heard of it." So when they said like Star-Lord, it's like, "Oh, I'm your biggest fan." Like that got me. I just started barreling laughing. Star-Lord, man. I thought that was
never heard of it. So when they said like Star-Lord, it's like, "Oh, I'm your biggest."
All right. Sorry, had some audio issues over here. Go ahead.
All right. So I love that scene like so much. And I didn't notice that now that you pointed out, I didn't notice the whole thing about T'Challa, just the bowing parallels there, and how he just projects sort of royalty even without having it. I think it's great. Now I think again, there's a lot of, I love this episode. I think it's a lot of fun, but there's a lot of like suspension of disbelief and grains of salt. Like the fact that it was a big cartoonish the way Korg was acting. It was like, "Oh, should I shoot you? Oh, are we having fun? Oh, you're actually hitting me!" Like he did. I'll play that, but I get that that's like the tone, and a lot. And we get to Thanos later, but a lot of this I just take as with a grain of salt and just go with it, because it's sort of a fun episode. But I just love that parallel so much of him saying "who" to "oh, I love you so much." Like this is what really grabbed me and pulled me into the episode. So totally love the scene.
Yeah. Darrin, what are your thoughts?
Definitely. It was interesting that you talk about the Star-Lord kind of comparison there. I believe, wasn't it Peter Quill's mom that called him Star-Lord, my little Star-Lord? And that's why he held on to that name.
Oh, was it? Okay. Yeah.
So that was one of those things like, why would you have that? But again, it's a big suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And Koroth's reaction was a little over the top. But it does set the tone for the episode well. It was just almost like you almost leaned into it just a little too far. But I love the fact that he did pick him up and take him with him. Again, a totally different thing from Peter Quill. So it establishes the difference in the character. And I think wasn't that the point that the watcher was making, is on circumstances, how much does the environment affect your nature, and how much of your nature affects the environment? And I think, like you were mentioning, Mark, kind of T'Challa's innate goodness and nobleness just coming from him create a different effect as he went through the lives and changing the people around and trying to convince, hey, let's do the right thing, as opposed to, you're right, stealing stuff is cool, let's do that, which is more the Peter Quill direction. So it is. It's an interesting thing on snowballing. I'm just sort of curious as we get into it, is like, okay, now at what point did these things start to shift and change versus the main MCU timeline? But again, that's kind of minor quibbling.
And there's a lot of, I'll talk about it a little bit more, but there's suggested a lot of huge differences between the main MCU timeline, going just beyond this. But we'll get to that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Once we get to the artifacts that the Collector has, which is interesting. Rob says, for me, if they had left Thanos Nebula out of this, I would have accepted the fun of this episode more. Well, we'll talk about Thanos and Nebula a little bit in just a couple minutes, but I got a couple more things I want to hit on before we get to that. But yeah, I decided to have fun with the Thanos thing, but we'll get to that in just a minute. So then we go to 1988, and this is where, like, when I had first heard of it, I was like, how would they get T'Challa instead of, like, how does that even make any sense? But how they explained it is that when they sent, Yondu didn't go himself, he sent his minions out, which one of them was Taserface, which I thought was pretty fun to have that character in the fold. He sent them out, and they're idiots, and they detected the signal from the meteorite, the vibranium meteorite that had crashed in Wakanda years and years ago. So it's an extraterrestrial signal. And they're like, that's the only alien thing that we saw. So they were just kind of lazy about it and like, oh, there's an alien thing. And then they went there. And with all the other suspending of disbelief I'm doing, I'm like, you know what? I will roll with that. I can accept that. Whereas before I was like, how? When I first heard of this, like, that doesn't make any sense. And then why he didn't go back and get Peter Quill, even though he was supposed to get him for Ego, makes sense within the Guardians of the Galaxy context because he didn't turn Peter Quill over to Ego in the regular timeline either. So he was like, looked like he was giving up on that whole capturing kids for Ego thing anyways. So I actually bought all of that. And let's see what else I have on it. Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say. What do you have to say about that, Darrin? What did you think about that whole thing and the explanation for how this all happened?
No, I thought that was a smart, quick, easy explanation. It's like, oh yeah, I mean, Wakanda's massively more advanced even than the rest of the planet, civilization-wise. That makes total sense why you would zoom in on that. And of course, it's not Yondu, so he doesn't have any real thought or plan on what he's doing. You're right, he's a couple of idiots. I did love Taserface. And while you're laughing at, like, why can't you tell the difference between these two? The all humans look alike to me line. You just got to kind of accept that. It's like, but aren't you kind of human?
Yeah,
but okay, whatever, It's alien stuff. We'll just accept that, generate planetary discrimination, speciesist. But no. I thought, again, the little connections they made with this were definitely fun and a little bit, and everything kind of made sense. Like, okay, this is why you have a different person. And this would sort of make sense where you have someone else who's T'Challa's like, yeah, man, I want to explore. Which versus, Peter Quill that might have been a little more traumatized, his mom just dying in front of him.
Yeah, so it was interesting. They just had that scene with, T'Challa being like, hey, can I, like, go out more? And his dad's like, no, we're going to stay in here. And, like, so it established that he really wanted to explore. So I thought it worked well. Do you have any thoughts on that sequence there, Mark?
I again, it's kind of like, it's just, I'm just gonna go with it. Like, I'm not even thinking how practical it is. I just think it's really funny that the shift change in this parallel, whatever you call it, universe or whatever, was that he sent his minions to do, and his minions are idiots and fucked up. Like, I just think that's a really funny concept, and so I just really like that. That's what's responsible for this whole shit change. That his minions are morons. But what is, like, there was Taserface, but then there's that other dude who's played by Sean Gunn. What's that guy's name? I can't remember.
I always just call him Sean Gunn.
Yeah.
I can't remember the character. What's the character's name, Darrin? Do you know?
I can't remember. I had it written down at a point, but no. And yeah, I'd always, every time I see him, I think the same thing. It's like, oh yeah, it's him.
Yeah, James Gunn's
Yeah.
father.
He's not very bright either, so I just found that the whole thing funny, and the whole thing with the wanting to explore is kind of them like telegraphing it. But again, like I do think this whole concept is like really, really loose as well, especially what they do with it. So I'm just totally like suspended disbelief and just going with whatever. And as long as they make it entertaining, that's very entertaining. So
Yeah.
I'm all for it.
Yeah, and the Guardians films themselves had a very lighthearted comedy
Yes.
feel to it. So it fits with the original films that this is sort of playing off of. One thing I forgot to mention in my overall thoughts is just made me think of it thinking of the Guardians films. One thing that I really missed, and I understand why they wouldn't have this, is from the Guardians films is a huge part of the Guardians films for me was the music. I think the soundtrack is amazing, and like I love how they use all the different songs and the different scenes. And of course, T'Challa, it wouldn't make sense for T'Challa to be dancing around with headphones on because that was Peter Quill's thing, and we get a little taste of that at the very end when he's at the Dairy Queen. But the music was such a huge part of Guardians for me that I missed it, but I also, if they had included it, I would have been like, well, that doesn't make any sense, and I would have complained about it. So
well, I mean, the other reason they left it out.
Oh, yeah.
Well, they would have to pay all those royalties.
Yeah.
You've already got a massive voice cast. You can't spend any more money on unnecessary music stuff. So Disney might own half of like the music.
I feel like Disney could afford
it. I don't know.
I feel like they can afford it.
Yeah.
But it's more. I think it's more of a story thing. It wouldn't have made any sense for the music to be present without Peter Quill. But I still miss it because I love that part of Guardians. But
I just saw what Brandon House in the chat said that his minions are Bebop and Rocksteady.
I was actually thinking like Skeletor's minions, like Beast Man, but yeah, it's all the same sort of like cartoonish, really dumb minions. It's classic trope. Yeah. So let's move on now to Thanos. And as I said, when I first saw that, I was like, oh my God, that might be, I don't know if I can suspend the disbelief for this much. It seems a little over the top. But you know what? The whole episode is just fun, and I decided to roll with it. And I thought of a possible explanation that makes somewhat sense that somebody else also on another video that I watched said the same thing, that this whole thing with the seeds of Genesis or whatever those things are called, that although it's presented as if T'Challa is learning about them for the first time, maybe he already knew about them, and that was one of the things that he had, because Thanos mentions, that there were alternative solutions that T'Challa had offered. So maybe that was one of the things that he offered him a better way to accomplish his same goal. Because Thanos was never going to have his mind changed on the fact that the universe was overpopulated and something needed to be done about it. But if someone were to offer him a better solution, and they did it like early on in the process before he started collecting Infinity Stones, I'll roll with it. I will roll with it. It's still a little bit of a stretch, but it's all a part of the fun. And I just ended up really enjoying seeing Thanos as like one of the guys hanging out at the bar and being one of their pals. So I decided to roll with it and have fun with it. Though it's the second week in a row where I found something. Last week was the Steve Rogers in the Iron Man suit, and the Iron Man suit being created so quickly, and then Steve Rogers being the one chosen to go inside of it, which made no sense. I was like, I was suspend disbelief for that. And so this week, I'm suspended disbelief for the Thanos thing, and because it was so much fun, so I decided to roll with it. I don't know if we've touched on it a little bit already, but do you have any other thoughts on Thanos and how that worked for you, Darrin?
Yeah, that is the point, I think, where that's the switch point. Do you accept this universe or do you not? And it is so cartoony.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of have to. You know, I mean, and I get how that kind of like shifts. You know, that's going to determine how you're going to accept the rest of the episode. But Josh Brolin is great, and how he keeps kind of going back to it. It's like, yes, but it was efficient. I think at the end when he's like, "Is that genocide?" No, because it's random. You know? I mean, it's like there's still that little edge to him that you can kind of go with. You know, it's like he's made me mad. You know, I mean, all of that stuff. It's totally ridiculous. But yeah, he's fun. You've got Thanos as part of your group. He's part of your crew that you're gonna go take on the Collector with. How can you say no to that? Is it ridiculous? Yes. Is it just is over the top? Entirely. But it's also fun, and it fits in with the tone of the episode. So yeah, again, that's why I'm split so much about how this, you know, in what ways, yeah, it's fun, it's great. I love seeing everybody and everything, and the cameos are all awesome. It's just that's what it is. You're right. Maybe it gets darker later on, and they want to get you the feel good stuff right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the tone was established very early on in the episode. And, you know, you just kind of roll with it. And I really don't think every episode is going to be like this. I think we should appreciate the fun stuff while we can, because we do know that at some point in the season, zombies are going to come into play. I don't know if that's going to be as fun and, you know, happy as this one was. So
if Rick Grimes shows up in that, then I'm in. I am way in. You could do a little Walking Dead Marvel crossover right there, and I'm fine.
Yeah. Mark?
Yes.
Thoughts on Thanos?
So, yeah, for this, I wasn't even thinking of this in practical terms. This like more reminded me of the original comics, where the whole point is like to throw characters you think you know in completely different roles, and they're in completely outlandish situations. And to me, that's the fun of like parallel universe stories or alternate realities. And so when they presented it really threw me off guard too, because the way they introduced him, because Korg was just saying, "Oh, I got hit by the Mad Titan," and he was like right behind him and was part of the crew. And I just love this use of him, and I think I'm less bothered by this use of Thanos than some people, because I was never a huge fan of Thanos in the first place. Like, I didn't really like him in Infinity War that much, and I think his motivations, they were trying really hard to flesh him out, and I don't think they succeeded. So for them to sort of lay on him and make them this sort of make the whole like wanting to wipe out half the universe's population like a punchline at a bar, I think was great. I absolutely love that. I love how they like called him Captain Genocide and whatever, and sort of made out of such jokes like, isn't that genocide? No, it's efficient. Like I love this use of him, and I personally could buy that if things like there's a whole parallel universe concept of like, you know, mirror universe or whatnot. If things turn out really, really differently, that they could be a completely different person. And that was actually one of my favorite aspects of the episode, to be frank. Like, I loved how they used Thanos in this one.
Cool. So I had just mentioned this before. I think I called them the Seeds of Genesis, but they're the Embers of Genesis. The only thing I just wanted to say, I immediately thought of Star Trek 2 and Genesis, the Genesis Project. It's almost the same exact thing. And it has the word Genesis in it, and it's about instantly terraforming planets. And I was just kind of curious if that's something that will come up again, or if that was strictly to try to offer an alternative to Thanos, or if that was strictly just something that we're going to go and get at the, you know, in our little heist here, or if there's something that's going to come into play again, because we do know that some of these characters will return. We may return to some of these same universes, maybe not on season 1, but in season 2, we'll talk about it later, but there's a scene at the end that maybe could be followed up on. I don't know. I just wanted to throw that out there. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about the Embers of Genesis, but I just wanted to say it reminded me of Star Trek 2.
Genesis!
No, it totally does, and I didn't even think about that. But yeah, it was just, to me, it's the MacGuffin of the episode. I didn't really think of it extending to anything else, or necessarily being the solution for Thanos. I thought this was just, that was a different adventure, and this was finishing this. We're saving this planet and system on this one, and we're going to go over and restart the sun over in here as we gallivant around the galaxy, saving people. Dun, dun, dun. You know, to me, I just saw them all as little one-offs. If they come back to them, you know, great and cool. I have no problem with that. But I haven't viewed or thought of any of these, even with the end credit scene, as necessarily anything they're going to bother going back into later on. But again, I don't know what the minds of Disney are thinking.
Yeah. Do you have anything to add on that one?
No.
Yeah. So I didn't really have much to say about the heist movie format, but I was just going to see if you guys had anything to say about it. I'm usually not a huge fan of these heist films. I like it when they're parodied. I thought Rick and Morty did a great parody of it last season. I like
son of a bitch.
Son of a bitch. But typically when I see that format, I'm like, but you know what? It was fine. I don't know if you guys have anything to say about that whole. And the whole like double crossing and triple crossing thing, that's like from. And I was like, I almost knew like immediately the Nebula was triple crossing and was really on their side to begin with, and it was like, or whatever. It was probably my least favorite aspect of it, but it didn't bother me that much.
Yeah, it's when I did my review for the DS9 episode with Vic Fontaine where they did the heist thing, and I trashed it. I said it was awful. And someone asked, "Do you hate heist movies?" It's like, no, I just hate bad ones. I just hate ones that try badly to emulate better ones. And I am a bit tired of the format, especially if you don't give anything new to it. But that wasn't like the whole point. It was the main driving force of the plot, but it wasn't the whole point of the episode. The point of the episode was the character stories, was the fun, was the different interactions and how the characters related to each other. So there wasn't that, it was pretty like standard, typical, especially the triple cross and whatnot. But it didn't bother me because to me that was like the means to an end to get to tell this fun character story that just sees how the characters relate to each other. So I wasn't actually either that involved nor bothered by the driving force of the plot. So it was just fine. Yeah.
Real quick before we get to Darrin, I want to say hello to Silver Surfer. Silver Surfer, thank you for joining us. Greetings to you, fellow dork. Darrin, any thoughts on that?
Not really. I mean, again, it was a perfectly serviceable heist plan, very standard, well executed. I think also having these shortened episodes, you don't have to do a lot. You do, the setup. They go in, the distraction, the inset, the double cross, the triple cross. Literally, it's like these are blocked out scenes and you just put character stuff in. It was done quick. I think you're right, Mark. They were perfectly done as just serviceable as how do these characters interact with each other now. As a setup, this makes sense. It's perfectly fine. Also, we got to see Howard the Duck.
Oh yes, Howard the Duck.
Oh yeah, I actually wasn't gonna. I forgot about Howard the Duck.
Oh yeah,
it's very similar. He had a cameo, and I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
He was at the end of one.
Oh, it was the end of one, and he had like one of the line. He only had like one line in that film, but one of the lines he said was very similar to that. Yeah, I don't know. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Like the MCU, including Howard the Duck, is like any future Star Wars stuff, including Jar Jar. It's like it's brave of you, but we'll see. We'll see how you handle it.
Sparingly is how you handle those things. See, this is the perfect bit. You don't have a Howard the Duck movie or show. You just have him come through like a Hunter Thompson cameo. That's what he's good for.
Yeah.
Didn't they have like some line about something that's was a duck, or he had like some saying about a duck, and T'Challa was like, nobody says that.
Yeah, and I think he said that's the line I'm thinking of that was very similar to what he said.
Oh, right.
There's one
yeah.
cameo in the Guardians films. Before we get to the collector, I wanted to talk about this Wakandan spaceship. When you guys have your turn, you can tell me if you saw it differently. But it looked to me like it was an unmanned ship. This is the way I interpreted it, that those were dummies. The other way I thought it was like maybe there were people once upon a time and who knows what happened to them. But I guess it was an unmanned ship sent out to look for T'Challa. And it just kind of... It makes sense because Wakanda is so far ahead of everybody else in technology. But it made me wonder if they have space travel capabilities in our universe. And I concluded that they probably don't because they wouldn't care to. Like, there would be no reason for them to. But since T'Challa somehow... I don't really get how they knew T'Challa was abducted by aliens, but somehow they knew that. And so they were looking for him in space and sent out this... I think it was an unmanned ship out to look for him. I was a little bit confused on that, but I did find it interesting that Wakanda would have space travel capability. I don't know. What did you make of that, Darrin?
I totally think that it was manned and they were killed, and that's why he has the Dora Milaje outfits put on dummies inside as sort of displays. No, I think it's totally. They probably I'm sure they had radar in 889 and they picked up a spaceship and the king was missing, or the prince was missing, and this thing appeared and then disappeared. So I can go with the fact that they would think of that and that they could develop some sort of plan. The one thing that I had thought at that point was, so were they not destroyed, but the whole Wakandan people went out into space to try and find T'Challa, like some roving band throughout the universe? Obviously, it wasn't that, but those are the questions that I had. But yeah, no, I totally think that it was manned, and they had sent a few of these off to try and explore maybe only one or two, and they got captured, and this is the one the collector kept. But I totally believe there were people in there to point.
Okay. Do you think Wakanda has space technology in the main MCU timeline, or they just did that just because T'Challa was missing and they went to look for him?
No, I think you're right on the money on that one. I think that there was no reason for them to develop that technology, and then the king saw that his son was taken, was like, well, we need to go after. We have vibranium. We can make. We have practically spacefaring ships at this point with their little, Quinjet similarities and hovercraft abilities. That they would have just kind of sent that out. I mean, again, maybe there was only a couple, and they were destroyed, which is why T'Challa never came across any of them in his journeys.
Yeah, Mark, any thoughts?
No, I agree with what you both said. I agree with what Darrin said, and what you said about about the ships. They never had any reason to build them in our universe. In this universe, they did, so that's why they did. And I do think that they were manned at first, and they were just killed by the collector. But yeah.
All right, let's move on. I want to talk about the collector. I can buy it. He has he's filled Thanos' power vacuum. I think that makes total sense. I was just fixated on all the different things that he had and how he got them. I'm thinking there probably isn't really supposed to be an explanation to it. We're just supposed to go, oh, look, he got all these things. So he had Captain America's shield, which, unless things were different in this universe, Captain America should have been still in ice, because this was said as 20 years after 2008. Captain America should have still been in ice at that point. Well, maybe somehow in this universe he came out earlier. And then he had... I always have a hard time pronouncing it. Thor's hammer.
Mjolnir.
Yeah. He had that. Is there supposed to be an explanation for these things, or we're just supposed to or maybe was there some cataclysmic event that killed these people and he went in and collected their stuff? And actually, Hela's helmet is like the biggest one for me. Like she is pretty hard to defeat. So she was pretty unstoppable. So how he ended up with that, I don't know if there's actually even if the writers like have an explanation in mind, like, oh, this is how he did it, or I tend to think that they were just like, oh, it would be cool if he has all this stuff. So I don't know. What did you think about that, Darrin?
I think it's more of wouldn't it be cool if he had all this stuff. I also want to know at what point did he decide to really start hitting the gym? Because Benicio del Toro's collector seemed to be a much more restrained individual than this particular like physical, hulking, laughing, unnervous at all person. You could get the personality change and such if he's filling in a hole, and I mean, to a certain extent. But again, it was also one of those like, okay, this is a completely different character.
Yeah,
this is a totally different kind of collector, a different way of approaching things. Yeah, at this point, you just have to assume somewhere the rest of the Marvel Universe fractured. The Battle of New York maybe never happened. If Thanos was changed before he sent Loki out there, is Loki still floating around? I mean, there's tons of questions. Obviously, Thor's hammer's there that he didn't go against Hela, but Odin still died, so she came back. Did he? You know, that's what I'm saying. Is at a point you just go, they're just having fun, and apparently they hate Korg because they have his arm.
Oh, yeah, the Korg's arm. I was going to mention that too. Well, he said that. Oh, I got this from a Chatty Krogan, and like, so it's got to be Korg, right? So yeah, poor Korg. He's got his arm. Yeah, I mean, what gets me is that it said 1988, then 20 years later. So this is 4 years before the Battle of New York. This is before Captain America was brought back from the ice, and unless things somehow change completely different, or I need to just stop overthinking it and just accept that they thought it'd be cool to have these things in there. And I think that's more what it was. Like, oh, look, Captain America's shield.
Yeah, I mean, that's how I took it. I just took it like, oh, isn't it cool to have the Captain America shield? It's like just like a brief little, oh, isn't this stuff cool? But yeah, and as far as the collector, his new body type, look, I just assumed he had like space steroids.
A space super soldier.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that just like completely buffed him up. You know, it's funny because when I was watching the episode, I was like, wow, this voice actor is not even trying to sound like Benicio del Toro. And then I looked it up. It is Benicio del Toro. I'm like, oh, okay.
You know, and that's what I was wondering too, because I'm like, okay, he does not sound the same at all.
Yeah.
But Benicio del Toro would totally do this. I mean, you know, why wouldn't they have him?
Yeah, and it might have been intentional just to show how different he is in this timeline.
Well, I know that some people were complaining about Bucky's voice, that Sebastian Stan was playing him differently last episode. But I think not being tortured might have a different effect and approach towards things. And maybe he's just a little more of a joyful guy than his other version. So you got to kind of go with the same thing. It's like, well, this is a different version of the same guy.
Yeah. All right, I want to jump into the chat. Brandon House says, what allows the collector so much power? I think we kind of answered that. He kind of filled in Thanos's. I think they explained that in the episode. He filled in the power gap left by Thanos. Also, does the collector remind you of the guy from The Most Toys, which is the Next Generation, Star Trek Next Generation episode? And it's interesting that you brought that up, Brandon, because Mark and I just recorded a joint review for Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 2, Episode 2, which oddly had a collector in it as well. And I was like, what is it with these animated shows this week having collectors? And in Lower Decks, it was absolutely based off of that episode that you were talking about. You were talking about a specific Next Generation episode where there was a collector who collected data. the Android data.
And collect information.
He collects information. He collected. He stole. He kidnapped data and wanted to add them to his collection. And the Lower Decks episode, I don't know if you saw it, Brandon, but that is directly a parody of the episode in question. But it's just weird to me that I watch these back-to-back cartoon animated shows that had collectors in them, but the collector from the MCU, of course, is a totally different thing. Already established in the Guardian films. And in the comics, as Rob mentioned, where did he say it in the chat? He is an elder of the universe. So I don't know if that has been really explicitly stated in the MCU or not, but I know it's a comic book thing, and apparently he and Jeff Goldblum, whatever his name is, they're
brothers. Yeah, the Game Master.
Brothers.
Yeah, the Game Master. That they are brothers, and they're both elders of the universe.
Well, I wanted to address what Rob said in the chat earlier.
Okay, go ahead.
About this sounding more like this seeming more like a what the comic than a what if comic, and Silver Surfer kind of repeated that, said that they felt the same way. I don't know. I wouldn't go that far. I think What If had their more lighthearted comics as well. The What The is like totally off the wall parody. So I think that it's saying a bit too much to say this is like a What The. This is just more like a more lighthearted What If.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
We should get a What The show.
Yeah.
But that'll be on Hulu though.
Yeah. All right. I just had one more thing I wanted to touch on, and then I'll see if you guys had anything else, and then we can be out of here. So I do want to touch on that ending scene, kind of like a post-credit scene, but it wasn't post-credits, but it's kind of like an afterthought. With Ego, voiced by Kurt Russell, as you mentioned earlier. They actually got Kurt Russell to do that as like 2 lines. But I thought that was very cool. And the Watcher's ominous voiceover that things don't look very good for this universe. So it's interesting to me that this such a happy-go-lucky, feel-good episode ends with, oh yeah, well, all that is great, but what about this? Like that, it seemed to imply, the Watcher's line seemed to imply to me that in this universe, Ego is going to have a much easier time getting Peter Quill to do what he wants him to do, since Peter Quill is not with the Guardians of the Galaxy. So that is something, and he does say at the end, a story for another time, perhaps. So that's the only thing that made me think that they could bring that back as a season 2 thing. Or it could be, as Darrin said, it's just, just the thing that they did and we'll never see it again. But I'm okay either way, honestly. I'm not like, well, if they don't bring that back in season 2, I'm going to be pissed. Like, I don't honestly care if we see that or not. But I did find it kind of interesting that, like, as fun and feel good as the whole episode is, it ends on such an ominous note, where with the Watcher's line very specifically leading us to believe that things are not going to end well for this universe, which I thought in a way was like weird that it contradicted the whole tone of the whole episode, but at the same time I kind of liked it. So I don't know what you guys thought about that ending scene. Darrin, we'll start with you.
Well, actually, I am wondering now if you're talking about if next episode is going to get a little darker, is their way of doing the bridge, of going, hey, y'all had a great time, didn't you? Well, things don't always work out good because T'Challa here, everyone's going to die. You just met. I know you like them. They're all going to die. Ego's going to eat them.
Yeah.
Giant, eternal stuff. So maybe that is an intentional shift for the season of letting you know. It is kind of an odd thing to sort of end off of like, yeah, everything was great, but it's not always that way. All these people are going to die. So yeah, if next week's episode is a little bit darker, if they take it in a little bit of a different direction, a less lighthearted, I think that this would make sense as just sort of a way the Watcher telling his stories are going to move into a different direction. I don't know. We'll sort of wait and see. But
That makes
it's
sense.
always great hearing Kurt Russell, even for a second and a half.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
And you got your music bit that we didn't have throughout the rest of the
Yeah.
episode, which kind of made you go, oh yeah, man, I kind of missed that. You know, it does. It kind of reminds you. It gets you back in that old feel.
Just a little side story. I was at an appointment the other day in the getting electrolysis, and the lady was playing. She always plays music, and this song came on that was like I only know from Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like and I was like, did I even know about that song before Guardians of the Galaxy? All I can think about is Guardians of the Galaxy. And it actually made me happy because I was thinking about Guardians of the Galaxy that whole time. So some of that music, I just have such a strong association with the film. So the music is very much a part of the film. So actually, yeah, I'm glad we did get a little tiny taste of it at the end there, because that's what really makes it for me. Rob says, I wanted a blizzard after the Dairy Queen scene.
Yeah, and the Dairy Queen, but that's a callback to the Guardians 2 movie that's where Ego, isn't that where he took...
That's where he planted his
seed
thing. In the woods, where the opening scene of 2, when he goes out there with his with Peter's mother.
Yeah.
And that's by that Dairy Queen there.
But do you know that song that they played at the end? Is that an older song, or is that a more recent song?
I heard that it was a Flock of Seagulls song from the 80s.
Okay.
So they actually had a song other than "And I ran so far away."
Now, I have heard that song. I hear that they play at my work on repeat, so I hear that song a lot. But I didn't know if it was recent or older. But okay,
that's their one other song. Yeah. But no, it was of the era, so it did give the feel. Actually, I didn't know if that was on the Guardians 2 soundtrack or not.
Yeah.
But no, it was of the era.
Yeah, now he mostly looked at 70s songs,
mostly.
I feel like, in the films. And that's more Flock of Seagulls is more 80s, early 80s, I think. And yes, Rob, I've heard that joke made by a lot of people. He planted a seed. I said he planted his seed. Yes, indeed, you did.
So my thoughts on this ending, I loved it. See, I actually thought it was like it kind of reminds me of like an Outer Limits ending where it's like ironic ending, because it's like it's just fun. Like all this great stuff happened because T'Challa was Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill. Like Thanos is great, and all this other stuff. He like saved all these worlds, and it's like you think, wow, what a great universe, because the Infinity Wars never happened. You never got to snap. Isn't this universe so better off? And you learn, like, actually, no, it's worse off because Ego's gonna kill everyone now. I kind of like that twist to it, so I liked it. I thought it was very great. But and as for whether or not they ever follow up on it, like, I'm happy if they do. I'm happy if they don't. Like, I think it's pretty standalone if they never follow up on it. I think it's just serves its purpose of having that. Well, maybe things aren't so great, but they do follow up on it, and that could be interesting too. So I'm sort of easy either way.
Yeah.
I love that Outer Limits analogy, because you're right. That is sort of perfect, because you're like, yeah, everything worked out great, but secretly you've actually killed everyone. Good job.
Yeah. And Rob says they will have to get the Infinity Stones to stop Ego. But who will do that? Because Captain America apparently doesn't have a shield. Thor doesn't have his hammer. Like, who's going to step up to the plate? T'Challa?
They'll have to find Peter Dinklage to get him to build something.
Thanos is no longer the Mad Titan. He's just the slightly perturbed, but mostly yellow Titan.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. All right. That is all I had to talk about. Did you guys have any other things? I'll start with Darrin first. And is there anything else we missed that you wanted to touch on?
No, I think that pretty much hit everything. I know we had a different version of Nebula in this as well, who, again, was fine. You still had the same relationship between father and daughter there, but they made up in the end pretty much. And so that's all wonderful and nice. No, I think it was just fun having the little cameos. Even walking through the collection, you still had Cosmo the space dog, who ended up back on the ship with them as they left. You know, you had the Howard the Duck. You had all the different little bits of collection. So it's the thing they can do that as fans, I think we always just sort of enjoy going, oh, I recognize that. Is that so-and-so's hat? Oh, is this the costume from, everybody's going to get to pick up something in the background, and the creators are going to have fun leaving little Easter eggs in the background for you to pick up. So that is kind of one of the fun, nice things about this. But yeah, no, I think we pretty much hit on all the big stuff.
Yeah, one of the fun things that I've enjoyed about these episodes so far is it reminds me of watching all the Mirror Universe episodes of Star Trek, and like Deep Space Nine would have a different one every season, and usually they got progressively worse and worse. Some of them were not great, but one of the fun parts for me, I was like, oh, that's what that guy's doing in that universe. Isn't that? Oh, look, Tuvok's there. Oh, isn't that fun? And so like I have that same kind of fun with these the first two episodes so far. Oh, look, there's that guy. There's Drax. Oh, there's Nebula. I do kind of wonder about Groot and Rocket, what they're up to, and Gamora is in the trailers, so some version of her is going to be in the season. I don't know necessarily it's the same universe. It might be a totally different timeline. I don't know, but some version of her will be in the show. But I was also curious like where she was. So it's interesting we saw some characters and didn't see others.
Yeah, well, that's actually what I was going to bring up, the absence of Gamora. I actually didn't think of Rocket. That's a good one. But I assumed that without Thanos becoming the Mad Titan, that she just lived a happy life on her planet, didn't get involved in any of this intergalactic nonsense. And so that's kind of what I thought of it. And also I love the Drax appearance and how he's happy. He's like, oh, my wife and kids, like they're still alive and he's fine. And they still had his like taking things literally joke, which I thought really, I think the movie's kind of really off and on. They're not consistent with that. But yeah, that was great to see. So yeah, it was interesting. I didn't even think of Rocket and Groot. Maybe they could have made just a quick cameo, but they didn't want to overload it.
Right? So, yeah. You can't put everybody in, and I get that. Like, you don't want to have just people just showing up just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's right. They don't get captured. They don't try to sell it. They don't get captured. They don't go to the jail, so they don't meet any of those people. You know, I mean, in some ways, it totally makes sense why that wouldn't happen.
Yeah,
but yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say with the Gamora thing, that's all the question of, at what point in the timeline was this change made? And, did she never become his daughter? Did she become, and then he got better and she's just off doing things because she doesn't want to be there? I mean, whatever. I think you're right. I think it's better they just wanted to focus on a group and just don't worry about everyone else.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say that I thought was interesting was that the Thanos' minions from Infinity War were the Collector's minions in this, and they actually got Carrie Coon to voice that same character. I didn't think they did until I looked up her. I was like, yeah, surely she wouldn't come just for the couple lines. No, but she did. So that was interesting too. That was an interesting sort of twist on it, and you actually got Thanos fighting that dude that was his minion. In Infinity War. So
Yeah, I actually saw a couple people complaining about that Thanos should have been able to kick those guys' ass, but I thought without the Infinity Stones,
exactly,
he wouldn't be able to, so I didn't have a problem with that.
Well, again, you have to have your heavy to show how tough the other person is, and if it's not a challenge, I mean, what is the point? It's just what somebody does. It's like the boss level you fight is one version, and then when you get him as a player character, it's a totally like minor version of the same person. It's a gaming reference. Sorry. I know you guys got it. So yeah, that's. But yeah, and again, there was no real problem with that. It's just that's the fun aspect.
Yeah. Cool. Rob says I want more of the Black Order. That's the name of those dudes. I was trying to think of it. The Black Order. I was trying to think of what they were. So I guess they're kind of like Thanos hired them and the Collector hired them.
Yeah.
So it just depends on who's paying them. So alrighty then. We've gone over an hour here. Let's wrap things up. So Mark and I will be back here next week, and Rob, who's been in the chat, will be joining us, and things will return to normal. Mark will be in his own separate square on the screen. Where you belong. Get out of my square. So I'm looking forward to that. I don't know exactly what the what if is, but it seems to have something to do with Loki and Nick Fury and the Avengers.
I just saw a description of it, if you want me to say.
Okay, and anyone who doesn't want the spoiler, then don't stop listening. Yeah, what is it?
All right. So it said, like, what if Loki took a more diplomatic approach, like during the Avengers, instead of like starting war and trying to conquer? What if he like tried to like took a diplomatic approach and did use diplomacy instead of trying to just invade Earth?
Oh, that sounds like a riveting episode. Stay tuned. Nick Fury and Loki sitting across from each other at a conference table.
The trailer certainly makes it seem a little more interesting than that.
Yes.
and if people are calling it darker, I'm assuming like that works out well for Loki. I don't know. We'll see. We will see. But regardless, Rob will be here with us to talk about it, and we'll talk about whether that worked or not. So Darrin, why don't you tell people what you are up to?
Thanks. I'm Darrin. I'm host of D's Reviews. We are finally getting to our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 Fans of S.H.I.E.L.D. discussion, and that will be starting on this coming Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific, over on D's Reviews. And we're going to break Season 4 up into 3 bits as the pods are. So we are starting things off with the Ghost Rider storyline from Season 4. We'll have Rob with me there before he comes over and talks with you guys about What If, and also Don Willie and Corey Shoemaker. So it will be a fun time. If you guys are Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans, pop on over next Tuesday, 6 p.m. live, and join the chat.
All right. Mark, what are you up to over on your channel?
Yeah, so usually you can find me over on Enchantment of Eternity. I am covering Star Trek Lower Decks. As Alyssa mentioned earlier, we're both about to drop a review that we did together. We recorded earlier today for the newest episode, and I'll be covering every other episode. I just dropped my season 1 review for Star Wars Clone Wars. I'll be covering every other season, hopefully in the future, and continue with Better Call Saul and more Star Trek videos and whatnot. So you can check me out on Enchantment of Eternity for that.
All right. And my name is Alyssa. I'm from Alyssa Jean's Reviews, the channel that you're watching right now. If you're finding me for the first time, please subscribe. And I'm a brand new channel. This is a rebirth of a previous channel that I used to have called Acton Tomko's Reviews, and I restarted a brand new channel, and I'm about 2 weeks old right now. So please, but I've got all kinds of content. I've just did a content dump and put all kinds of Star Trek, Star Wars, MCU. I've now got all of the MCU projects from Phase 4 covered, so you can see my thoughts on all of those. And we will be back here every Thursday, same time, 6 o'clock West Coast time, 9 o'clock East Coast time. And as I said, Rob will be here with us next week from Smirk and Gun Reviews. And I too will be covering Lower Decks, every Star Trek Lower Decks every week. So please check out all of that stuff. And we will see you all next week. And bye.